We're joined by Chris Mannix, host of the Chris Mannix Show, weekday afternoons on NBC Sports Radio and the NBC Sports Radio app. And a couple down days in the NBA. We'll jump into that. Chris also a boxing analyst as well. And Chris, I do want to start off and get your thoughts and any dealings you may have had over the last couple of days reflecting on Muhammad Ali. We've had so many great stories on our show, and would certainly like to give you the forum to speak on that topic as well.
Well, I mean, I wrote the other day that one of my greatest regrets as a sports writer was that I didn't have an opportunity to cover the great Muhammad Ali. I mean, I've spent the last couple of days, like everybody else, a fan of these phenomenal profiles and these rollicking features kind of being written by the likes of Dave Kindred and Jerry Eisenberg and marveling at the athlete that they were able to cover. And maybe 20 years from now, I'll look back at some of the athletes I've covered, in my time as a writer, and say I was really lucky to have the privilege to do that. But I don't think there'll ever be an athlete that I'll cover that would have the depth of the complexity, I guess is probably the better word, and the luminary of Muhammad Ali. I mean, he was such a transcendent figure in every walk of life, not just sports, but everywhere, and not getting a chance to kind of dig into that and become and develop a relationship with him and cover him on a regular basis. For me, that's something I feel like I always missed out on.
Yeah, and Chris Mannix with us, Muhammad Ali passing on Friday night, and a lot of great stuff. We had Angelo Dundee on back in 2010, and we re-aired that interview yesterday, and he had said that Muhammad took every fight like he was going to a party, and I think that kind of characterizes his larger-than-life personality, and I know you got a chance to talk to guys like George Foreman and others. Did they seem the same way, that this guy was more than just a boxer, that people who might not realize that, was that the message that a lot of these guys that you took from them talking to them in the last couple of days?
Oh, yeah. Whether it's George Foreman, Bob Arum, the many people still out there that were linked to Muhammad Ali over the years. It wasn't – the conversation rarely was about his greatness as a boxer, and I think we can all – established that his skills in the ring, at the very least as far as heavyweight goes, were beyond reproach. But it was always about his personality. Everyone's got a great story of a phone call with Muhammad Ali or an interaction with Muhammad Ali that was either funny or something that made them really think about the world at large and his positions on stuff that made guys really contemplate what was going on in the world. I mean, he was such an intelligent guy and such a deep guy that the things he said were just so far before his time that it must have been so difficult to comprehend and really compute back then, because even now you look back on it and you say, wow, that was really something.
Chris Mannix with us. You can read his stuff, too, at The Vertical, NBA analyst. We'll talk about the NBA Finals here. We talk about Ali and his greatness. A lot of people look at a guy like LeBron and talk about his greatness as well, but that is not shining through enough for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Is this a good Cavaliers team just getting beat by a historically great Warriors team? What's your read on the way Cleveland's played the first two games?
Yeah, I think losing is not a knock against the Cavaliers. Losing as badly as they have, that's where the problem lies. I mean, Golden State's great. They protect their home court. Everyone expected them to. Did everyone expect them to beat Cleveland by 20, 25 points, if not more, each game? No, of course not. I mean, this Cleveland team came into the finals with a lot of momentum, and Golden State came into the finals a little bit beat up from a 7-game series against Oklahoma City. And you watch the series, and it really does look like varsity against the JV out there. I mean, it's Kevin Love can give Cleveland nothing. Kyrie Irving hasn't been effective. The role players have been completely overmatched on Cleveland's side. I mean, when you look at what Sean Livingston and Iguodala and Barbosa have given compared to what J.R. Smith and Dellavedova and Tristan Thompson have given, it's night and day with this team. So, look, going back home is going to be effective for Cleveland. Role players tend to play better on their home court with their home crowd. So I expect a closer game in Game 3, but there have to be some significant adjustments and some significant key players stepping up in this next Game 3, or else just being at home isn't going to get the job done.
Yeah, and you figure the Curry-Thompson duo really hasn't played their best yet. Are you disappointed in Kyrie Irving? I mean, last year they didn't have Irving, they didn't have Love. They added those two guys plus Fry, and you're thinking, look, they won 6 games without those pieces. You add these pieces, we should have a much more competitive series, and it just hasn't been there. What do you attest that to?
Yeah, no question. Guys like Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, who I know they weren't big factors last year in the postseason, but in the case of Irving, he was part of the postseason run to get to the finals. He was largely healthy for the Eastern Conference playoffs and got the requisite experience you'd think he needed coming into this series. But he's just been outplayed, and part of that I give Steve Kerr a lot of credit for. This Warriors staff has figured out the best ways to expose Cleveland defensively. I mean, they're running Kyrie all around the floor. They're putting Kevin Love in every pick-and-roll situation imaginable. They're recognizing the defensive deficiencies of their opponents, and they're trying to take advantage of them almost every single time down the floor. So these guys you've got to just play better. I mean, it's easy to say, strategy this and strategy that, and certainly there's some things that Cleveland needs to clean up. But if you're Kyrie Irving and you're considered one of the top 5-6 point guards in the NBA and you're staring down the reigning MVP, you've got to accept the challenge. You've got to step up. And if you're Kevin Love and you're being given open shots and they're daring to put Sean Livingston and Klay Thompson on you in switches, you've got to make them pay. I mean, these guys are getting paid a lot of money, $20 million per year type of players. If you're going to make that salary and you're going to be considered among the elite, you've got to step up and make big plays.
Chris Mannix here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Chris, get your opinion on the rumored Noel Teague swap that seems to be gaining some steam. Also, that the reports out there, the Sixers are shopping Noel and Okafor to at least 15 teams. It sounds like they are willing and able to move one of those two guys. But are you a fan of Teague for Noel if you're Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a solid trade, I think, for both teams. I don't know that it's anything close there for starters, just because, Atlanta, the last, 6 months, that basically kicked the tires on breaking up that team and sort of kind of starting from scratch a little bit, especially with Teague, with Dennis Schroeder kind of waiting in the wings. But that's the type of deal that Atlanta will throw out there and see what they can get. And I think they're casting a much wider net than Philadelphia. That being said, if you want to look at that deal in particular, Philadelphia needs a point guard. I think Teague's probably got 3 or 4 good years left in him. I like Nerlens Noel. I think he's a better fit alongside a guy like Joel Embiid than Jahlil Okafor is, but you know what you're getting with him. He's a defensive player, a rim runner. He's not going to evolve in the coming years into probably an all-star level player. So if you can get a point guard like Teague, and more importantly, if you can re-sign him at the end of the year, because he is going to be a free agent after next season, it makes some sense for a team that's determined to turn the corner on the rebuilding process.
Yeah, it seems that there's a lot of 50-50 split on that, where some people like Noel, other people don't really aren't big fans of what his game brings. But then the Teague thing, is it incumbent on knowing if he'll come back to you? I mean, he can walk at the end of the year. Would that be a big failure if they made that deal and then he walked?
Yeah, it would be, especially if you're giving up a player like Noel, who goes on, has a solid 10-year career as, I don't know, a lesser version of Ben Wallace or something like that. I mean, you can't give up a player for a 1-year rental like that. So you'd have to have an understanding with Teague's team about what his thoughts are on staying in Philadelphia. Obviously, the Sixers are in a different place right now than they were a year ago. They've got the number 1 pick. They've got a lot of cap space that they're willing to spend right now. They're not this sort of stumbling, bumbling, rebuilding team that is going to win 10, 15 games next year. So there's that in terms of the positivity of getting Teague to resign. But you've got to be pretty confident. You can't roll the dice on a player that's approaching 30 that he's only going to be there for 1 year.
Chris Mannix, everybody, host of the Chris Mannix Show, weekday afternoons on NBC Sports Radio and the NBC Sports Radio app here on the Sports Bash. Game 3 tomorrow night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Good stuff, Chris. We appreciate it as always, pal.
You got it anytime.